This week we got Brandon Lilly on the podcast. If you know anything about Brandon, you know this is a guy who has had a tremendous journey through life. Was a champion powerlifter for a long period of time. A super accomplished trad bow hunter. He's part of the Sorenex family, Sorenex Outdoors, and just a guy who's really, really honest about the things that he's gone through in his life. So, yeah, we talk about hunting, but we also spend a lot of time talking about just the difficulties of the journey that men go through. Our pursuit of excellence, the things that we all try to achieve, the mountaintop that we're trying to reach, and sometimes how that leaves us feeling really alone unless we're able to build a tribe of people around us that we can count on, that we can rely on, that we can build fellowship with, and people that we can trust when we're having a difficult time, people that we can reach out to that we know are going to be there for us. So we had a great conversation. This is a tribe conversation. If you're looking for, a million tips on hunting, this isn't going to be that podcast. But if you're looking for a conversation around the way we build connection, the tribe of the men that get together and the community that we build as hunters and the importance of that, this is a great conversation. I really appreciate Brandon taking the time to be here. He is an awesome gentleman, and I am thankful to get to know him better. Enjoy the podcast. Thank you for being here. All right, we got Brandon Lilly on the podcast today. What's up, brother?
Not too much, man. How are you doing this morning?
I appreciate you jumping on, man.
I apologize that it has taken this long, but I'm glad to do it.
Hey, no worries. It's anything worth doing is worth waiting for, right?
For sure, and timing's right. So
that's right. So here's my first question for you. Have you ever seen that big red barn?
Yeah.
And what's that kid's deal?
Man, so Brendan is a really cool dude. He I didn't know
we're talking about Brendan Sodoma right now, right?
Yeah, Brendan Sodoma.
I texted him last night, and he was like, I'm like, I'm recording a podcast this morning, and he goes, who's on? I'm like, Brandon Lilly. He goes, ask him if he's ever seen that big red barn.
Yeah. It's man, he's connected to me through Trent Murphy, and Trent Murphy played for the Bills.
Yeah.
Friend of Sorenex, big outdoorsman, especially after career. I think like a lot of guys that go through something at a high level, they're always looking for something to kind of fill that void.
Was he a hunter when he was like, I think I saw a picture of him with like a deer in like a big buck inside of Bill Stadium. So he's been a hunter his whole life, right?
Yeah, that's a pretty cool story too.
Yeah.
There was something they had gotten into the playoffs, or they were destined for the playoffs or something. So kind of like the kings of the city at that moment. So whenever he got that deer, he was like, if there's ever a time that this is going to go over better than others, it's right now.
How did that one play with the New York crowd?
I think they loved it.
Did they?
I think they did. I think.
Football fans are those kind of people, right? They're not
for
like
sure, especially Buffalo, Rochester area. Those are blue collar, hardworking people. I think and especially like in Brendan's area. To get back to him, so when I went up there, I've always been on the eastern side. I've always kind of gone up through Connecticut in that area, and never really had ventured west. And when I started going to Rochester, getting around that area, Buffalo, I'd seen Niagara when I was younger, but I didn't really remember it. But nevertheless, I didn't remember much about the surroundings. And Trent had talked to me about Brendan, and Brendan was like, hey, man, would you like to come up here for a hunt? And I was like, absolutely. So we go up there and we hunted, and man, he has just got an incredible farm. He does a lot of different things, but primarily apples.
It looks gorgeous. I've never been there. I've seen pictures of it. He actually asked me if I wanted to come up, and I was like, I'm trying to figure it out if I can make it happen, like after the holidays. But it looks amazing.
It is, and he's a wild man in his own way. Like he's a veteran. He's kind of just got that, like, I've earned my right to live how I want to live, and not in an asshole way, but just he works for it. So I got a lot of respect for Brendan. Liz and I went up there, and we tried to hunt some turkeys. He busted his ass, did everything he could, and we were close, but just never could seal the deal. But getting to know him and just getting to watch, and man, he has so many. Even when we went up there, he just had a loyal group of friends and people around him. And it seems like everything that he does is to cater for those people. I really did feel like, I don't want to say like part of the family, but immediately welcomed into that group. And everything that you could imagine was just thought about, looked after. And they actually had a hunt that I couldn't go on a few weeks back. And he went as far as like reserving a conference hall and having catered food and this, that, and the other. So, yeah, the Big Red Barn is a very special place. And I think more and more with the caliber of deer that are being taken off of that farm, that's going to become an iconic stigma in the hunting world, is that Big Red Barn with something very, very substantial in front of it.
I mean, that one that he just shot last, it was just a few days ago, because I'd been talking to him, and he's like, yeah, he goes, I've got 2 of them out here that are, hammers. And
Yep.
he's like, they've kind of been snaking around at night. I haven't seen him, but he goes, I'm going to slip into the stand in the swamp, and I think I might be able to catch one. I'm coming by. And literally like 5 hours later, he sends me a picture. He's like, I got him, man. I took him down. I was like,
Yeah.
he was a nice freaking buck. That thing was huge, man.
Yeah,
He's got nice deer up there.
he really does. I mean, 140, 150, 60, 70, maybe even more than that class. I don't know what his buck scored, but it was
I think it was close to one. He thought it was going to be a 200, like close to 200, and he's like, it wasn't quite as big as I thought it was going to be, but it was still like a 170, I think.
Yeah,
it was big.
I mean, it would not surprise me if there's a giant in the mist up there, some kind of freak that's hidden in those swamps, because that's where the big bucks like to stay, it seems. But yeah, I mean, anybody that ever gets a chance to interact with Brendan, I mean, like I said, he's just a guy that lives on his own terms, and very unique individual. I've never met too many guys like him. He's crushing it in life, and he's got that mentality that nobody's going to stop me from doing what I want to do. So, got a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, he's had a heck of a season too, in terms
Oh my God,
of what he's done. Like, it's crazy, man. Like, that's like a lifetime season.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about just an unbelievable mule deer, turn around an unbelievable elk, and then the big ram.
That ram.
I mean, any one of those 3 would be like the flagship of your season
For sure.
in a given year. And then you throw that whitetail on top, and it's like, man, from September till December, it's basically one giant Boone and Crockett level animal every month.
Yeah.
I don't know if they scored that to be exact, but I'm just saying they are that caliber. Just looking at them, they look phenomenal.
Yeah, there's no question. You said something in there about, you're talking about this group of friends that he has, like this group of people that it's interesting too, because I got the same impression, even though I haven't been up there.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't hunted my whole life, right? I've just started hunting in the last couple of years after being on the football field for over 30 years. And one of the things that I think that I've seen the most and that I've gotten the most out of hunting has nothing to do with being in the woods. And it's this tribe, right? These people. I've met people that are different than most people that I've ever, been around my entire life, including football coaches who you would think like, okay, that would be a kind of the same group of guys. But these hunters help each other so much, and they're so giving of their time and their knowledge. It's pretty amazing, man. Like, and I know that you've experienced the same thing.
Yeah, well, I am I am a guy that loves camp. I love the woods. I've said many, many times that as much as I have questioned my faith in life as a man, there's a sense and a completion of the circle of thought when I'm in the woods. Like, everything has a balance, everything has a place, everything has an order. And I think that's where I feel the closest to my spirituality, my faith. And that sounds a little cliche, but it's really true, because in day-to-day life, you get going so fast that you don't think about everything you should. You don't process things the way you should. And those few hours in a deer stand, or if you're out, like I go to Oklahoma and pig hunt a lot, and those kind of moments where it's really just a lot of in between time is special. But the camp, in particular around the fire or over a meal, is where you really get to know people. And man, I can tell you, I've had a lot of points in the last 4 or 5 years, definitely the last 4, where you question humanity as a whole. And then you sit down with 10 strangers and it's like, you know what? The world's not so bad. It's not full of everything that you hear and this, that, and the other. You just get to know people on a different level. It's an intimate setting because everyone's trying their hardest. Everyone's hoping for something special to come out of the woods and make that successful shot. But I love cooking. And in camp, I've always, if you know, out at Big Chino, they have a chef, but I always, can I help? Can I do something? Can I cut some meat? Can I
You're the
cut some
camp
lettuce?
chef.
I would say I'm a sous chef. I'm a
Oh,
self-appointed sous
okay.
chef. But you know, man, food for me is just that is such a connecting piece of the human experience. You know, when you can have amazing food or cook for someone, like when I kill a deer, I really relish in the chance to cook the heart. And one of my favorite ways to do that is very simple. I take all the skin off, I take all the inner workings of the heart out and keep it just a really nice clean piece of meat. Fine dice. I caramelize some onions, saute some bell pepper, little butter, little Creole seasoning, salt, and then I'll throw the heart in just long enough to get a good cook through on it. And I serve that either on like buttered bread or a cracker or something like that.
Man,
And
that
I
sounds
mean,
freaking amazing.
it's the simplest, most like I have never ever served it and it
Uh-huh.
didn't get wiped out. And then I notice a few, not everyone, but a few of the guys in camp will start saving their hearts. And that's a win for me. You know,
Yeah,
like
that's cool. That's super cool.
that's the kind of stuff that really I get into about the hunting aspect of it too. Because you know, when I grew up, basically my experience of eating deer was fried tenderloin or fried backstrap, and I think it was probably a credit to Meat Eater and guys like John Dudley or Rogan that started showcasing, hey, you can smoke these at a lower temperature, do a reverse sear on them, and you've got a like fine piece of meat that doesn't get washed down. Which somebody cooks me some fried backstrap, I'm your biggest fan.
Yeah.
But there is levels to how you can do this, and there are intricacies to how you can do this. And I think when I started looking at it more from that perspective of like, man, how can I really maximize what this entire experience is, you know? And the more that I like something or like the way that it tastes, the more encouraged I am to cook it. And I'm just not in a place in my life where I want to sit and eat fried backstrap every day. But having the tenderloins or having a nice roast that you cook all day and you shred it up and put that over some rice or over some potatoes or something like that. I mean, full spectrum consuming the deer as much as possible. You know, I'm not going to be a guy that's necessarily eating the kidneys every time, or I'll eat the liver here and there, but you know, I do try to utilize that gift of taking that life and fueling my own. So it's a special thing to me. But the camp, I'll tell you a funny story. I remember in Kentucky one time I was hunting with some guys and the topic of conversation. I mean, this was a special camp. Everybody had a really good time. There's a lot of success. And it was one of those times where no matter how early you got up, everybody was tired at 9 o'clock, but you find yourself sitting by the fire at midnight still talking and
Yeah.
passing a cigar around, or everybody had their own, or pouring more bourbons or whatever. And you really do get this sense of when people become vulnerable. And a lot of these guys that I was in camp with were high flyers, hard chargers, success at every turn. And you know, in the struggles of a camp, the up and down, the fatigue, the tiredness, um, people become a little bit more open, and you start to see, well, this guy, you know, he played in the NFL, but no, he's a human. He's got problems just like I do. Or hunting with Bert, you know, he's got things he's going through or things he's dealing with. Or Bo Sandoval, you know, just guys that I've become close with because of deer camp. And you know, Bo and I, one time in Arizona, we were just kind of buddy partners or buddy hunting together, and we'd kind of take different directions, but we'd always ride out in the same vehicle, ride back in the same vehicle, and we'd glass together and things. You spend a week with somebody like that, especially a critical thinker and a bleeding heart, open minded person. You start to learn a lot about who they are and how they work and how they think. And Bo Sandoval has to be one of the finest human beings I've ever met. And he's probably helped me figure out how to be a better man. Like I'm getting emotional talking about it, just some of the conversations we've had. But Bo is one of those guys, Bird as well, that they have given me so much to think about and to ponder. Um, so back to the time that we were sitting around the fire,
I
somebody,
just I met Bo for the first time at Summer Strong
yeah,
last year, and just was super impressed with him. And I didn't get to talk to him very long, but I got that sense that you just said.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, I would encourage you at Winter Strong or Summer Strong or even hell, I'll get you his number. Like I'll make sure you guys connect because, dude, I just look at that guy. He's in a high stress environment. College sports is insane. He's at a
yep.
high level university, and dude is just all about wife, kids, self growth, and he's not beating his chest about it. He's just doing it. And more guys like that are what really get me going because, dude, I was thinking about it the other day. I watched this guy, and I don't want to hate on anybody because I was probably the same way in powerlifting, and somebody out there right now would probably accuse me of the same. But it was like watching a NASCAR race. This guy was going hunting, and he's like, it was just I've got my Sitka gear on and my Hoyt bow and my marsupial vinyl harness and this and this and this and this and this, and it was nothing about the hunt. It was all about all the companies that supported him. And you talk to Bo, and he's like, I don't know what I got. I got this or I got that. It's just he's all about doing himself. But those guys really did kind of highlight to me the doers are so much more valuable in this world than the talkers. And Bo, Bert, those kind of guys are just doers. And they may highlight a product or something. I'm not saying that's all bad, but when it becomes that you're only talking to sell something, I start tuning out. And I've never felt like those guys tried to sell me a story, tried to sell me anything. They just try to tell you the truth. And one of the things that I really enjoy about a guy like Bo, he's a friend that'll stab you in the front, not stab you in the back. Like he'll tell you exactly what you need to hear and maybe don't want to hear.
Yeah.
But he's just one of those guys that I love you, Bo. If you hear this, I love you. And it's special. And those things, I was friends with him. I met him at Liberty University when Bill Gillespie had a few of us out there to talk.
Hmm.
And in my mind, then he's just like a super coach. And I think a lot of times we put people in these roles of what they do and not who they are. And I was certainly that way. I was a fan of his coaching. I was a fan of his presentation. I was a fan of the things that I heard him say because it was coaching centric. But knowing the man is such an elevated thing. Like if people were paid on who they were as individuals, Bo would be a billionaire. Like as a coach, he should be paid whatever he's paid and more. I'm certain of that. But if he was paid on his merit as a friend and as a husband and a father, he would just the checks would roll in daily. And that's what really inspired me was like, man, I don't think there's very many people that could tell you my powerlifting total or tell you my lifts. But there are people that will tell you that I was not my best version as a powerlifter. And I started thinking about that when I got into hunting. I was like, here's this beautiful thing, this very natural thing. I don't want to be someone that taints that by making it about me. And I'm sure I've done that. I am sure I've done that. But the older I've gotten and the more I've found people like that, it's like his kids aren't going to talk about his deer. They're not going to talk about anything that he shoots or hunts or whatever. They will talk about the man that he was. And man, that is infinitely more important. And I think the type of man that he is makes him a better hunter, if that's fair. And it might have been Bo. No, it wasn't Bo that said this, but somebody said at this particular camp, it would be amazing if Rogan was here. And I don't think it was me. I think it might have been the whiskey talking. But I said, I think it would suck if Rogan was here because all of us would have been trying to cater to him, to be his friend or to impress him or to catch his attention or huddle him away in the corner and have a conversation. And here you had 10 or 12 guys that were just talking and sharing and giving and cooking together and eating together and going out together and supporting each other and dragging deer out of the woods together. I think if you have somebody in there like a Rogan, it can mess up the chemistry of a group like that. And that's one of those epiphany moments where I was like, it really is not the status of a person, it is the quality of the people. And ever since then, it was just like something went off. And I've always been a people person. I've always invested in getting to know people, but I don't really care to sit and listen to people tell me how great they are. I would rather you tell me what you struggle with, what you are dealing with, or how you're getting through it, or how you got through it, because that's what I can learn from. I can't be a better coach just by hearing Bo talk about coaching. Like, we can talk reps and sets and I can gather that, but I would have to actually be around Bo for a week or two at a time to gain something as a coach. But as being in a group with him for a week or two, you gain something as a man because he's on his knees struggling just like I am, like trying to figure it out. So that's where I think camp is so important. And to your point, the woods, the harvest, the meat, those are all ancillary kind of benefits. But what you get from that camp, or in some cases, I've been to some camps where I was like, I could not get away fast enough. Um, it's a very eye-opening thing how important camp actually is.
Yeah, what I've found is that as I've gotten older, and I'm a lot older than you, but I've been same thing. I was for 10 years coaching college football. I was around, it was a very high intensity, kind of going after it, hard environment. When I was in that environment, and and I've been in business as an entrepreneur now, started multiple businesses over the course of the last 20 years. I don't ever get around many people who are willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's like they kind of have this is their face that they wear, and it's the Superman face of whatever they're trying to do or trying to achieve. But I have found in this community, and maybe it's just that I'm looking for that at this point in my life.
Yeah.
But I've found that the people that I connect with, or at least the people that I connect with and stay in touch with, are people like that are people that are willing to be transparent, willing to be open about the things they struggle with, because that's important to me, because that's how I continue to grow, is to be able to engage with those kind of people, share things that I may know that I've learned over the course of my lifetime, but at the same time learning, from them.
Yeah.
Because I'm the same as you. Like, I've got 4 kids, anywhere from 30 down to 18. They're all at different points in their life. I've got an amazing wife, that I've been married to for over 20 years. And she's, like the centerpiece of my life other than my faith. And so we all have like this web in our life, right? And a lot of people just kind of wear this is who I am, but really we're so much more than that. And the people that are willing to be open about the things that they struggle with, the places, when they get into a really dark place, which I know you've been in, I've been in my life, like, you got to have people around you that you can reach out to, or you're just in a hole by yourself.
Yeah, I certainly think that is true, because I mean, it's like when you get inside your own head about something, or you start to think something or process something where I'm not good enough, I'm not where I should be, I'm not, the bills are due and there's no money in the bank, or whatever your struggle may be. Um, Man, those walls close in very, very fast.
Yeah, they do.
And when I was at my worst, like I said, I think I was running scared when I was a powerlifter. And on multiple fronts. I was running from a life that was completely white picket fence, American dream, on paper. And then in '08, when the recession happened, I lost my job. Ended up really just struggling to figure out what to do next. Family kind of dissolved. Um, Ended up going to West Side, and at that point, everything that I had known was gone. I mean, I had stability. I had everything that a person would want in 2007.
How old were you? How old were you at that point?
That would have been 26, 27 years old, rolling
Okay.
into 2009. So I was
Yeah.
born in '82. And man, I grew up so much better. I mean, there were hard aspects of my childhood. I grew up on a pretty tough street, youngest kid of 17 kids on the street. So I kind of got, I was the 5-year-old that was the running back, and I was the tackling dummy on the street, and
Yeah.
I was the punching bag for the older kids and whatnot. But dude, I don't want to paint it out as like it was just some terrible life. I mean, I had parents that stayed married. My dad worked a lot. My mom worked hard. I was with my grandparents a lot, but there was always food on the table. There was always a roof over the head. But to tell you the truth, the street I grew up on, a kid had his neck slashed dealing drugs. He was like 16, 17. So that was around. But I think if you looked at it, it looked more like Mayberry than that. But in the
Yeah.
underworkings of where I grew up, there was some rough stuff going on. And nevertheless, uh, get through life. And at 26, 27, like I said, graduate college, married, kid, new car, new house, new job. Everything's good. And then the recession hit, and all of that seemed to go away. And in that time, I was like, man, everything that I thought was real was not. It's a lie. And the hardest thing for me was my grandfather and my great grandmother passed away within very, very close proximity of one another. And his other brother died within, they all died within about a 6 to 8 week period.
Oh, wow.
And for a small Kentucky rural family, that was, I mean,
Devastating. Yeah.
devastating. But the two things that stuck out to me the most, and probably for good and bad impacted me the hardest, my great grandmother was extremely faithful, probably the most religious Christian I've ever met. And she would periodically quote the Bible if it was relevant, but she was grace defined, like just the sweetest, kindest, thoughtful. And she lived much like I was talking about before. She was a doer. She just lived her life in a Christ-like way, and heavy influence on me. And she had this cross pendant, and she would rub it when she would get nervous. I got to know that about her. She'd rub it when she got nervous, and it was on her as, I mean, it was just like her skin. It was there every day. And the one thing that she told me her whole life was, she said, I pray every morning at 4 a.m. I go through my prayers. And I can remember this from being a kid because I would sleep in her bed. Her and my great grandfather slept in separate bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a spare bedroom. So I would sleep in the bed with her.
Okay.
And she would pray out loud. And sometimes
Yeah.
I remember being a kid, like 4 a.m. I'm like, what are you doing? You know, but she was praying. And she said, I just pray every day that I don't outlive my boys. And I remember her saying that a million times. My grandfather, very successful throughout his life, and then kind of hit some business hardship and ended up going back, kind of circling back to his roots, and was a truck driver at the end of his life. And his thing was, man, I don't care where I die. I just don't want to die in that truck. And lo and behold, his brother passed away from a heart attack. My grandfather died tragically driving his truck. And after that happened, I was already shook because my grandfather was like, I mean, he was all four heads on Mount Rushmore to me. Like he was it. And
what was it about him that made you feel like that about him?
Man, he was the funniest guy in the world. Like the funniest guy in the world. He was smart. He was good, hardworking, and just the way he showed me how to do little things. Like he taught me how to work on cars, taught me how to change oil. I mean, my dad showed me this stuff too, but it was almost like my grandfather was a better Mr. Rogers, you know, just like a better version of, he knew how to talk to people. He knew how to make every single person laugh. I never really saw him upset, never really saw him have a bad day. Just a model of a man that I looked up to and clung to, honestly. And the one thing I was talking about the other day, their house when I was a kid, I'll never forget the smell. And I smell bits and pieces of it occasionally, but I remember waking up in the mornings. I never saw the man with a scrappy beard at all. Like every day he was clean shaven. So he always had that aftershave smell, had a little bit of cologne, and he always did his hair kind of combed over and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like his morning routine smell met with a cigarette, a newspaper, bacon, and coffee. Like that was the smell when you walked in the kitchen.
That's cool, man.
And I just remember those things. Dude, I can smell them as I'm talking about them.
Yeah.
Like I can remember that. And it didn't hit me yet, his statement about dying in the truck. Like it was there, but it wasn't like this is a blip on your radar that you need to focus on. But I was the one, because I was the eldest male, that had to tell my granny both times that her boys died. And buddy, you talk about one of the hardest things I've ever done. And not to put too much on it, but her husband, my great grandfather, took his own life at 83 years old, and the the strength that she had through that, and that's a whole different story. I'll tell you some other time, but it really weighed on me, the the thought of a man, because everyone called him a coward, but I stayed with him after she had gone to the hospital for a heart condition. She had to have a surgery, and I stayed with him for those days while she was in the hospital. And it was like a small child staying with him, because he's like, I don't know how to cook, I don't know how to do this. She does everything, and he's like, I'm the one that's put her there. I'm the one that's put the stress on her heart. I've been a terrible man. I've done just kind of like falling apart. And it wasn't very long after her surgery and she got back home and kind of got on her feet that he took his own life. And I think after a little bit of time and reflection, maybe it was cowardice, maybe, probably in some ways, but I also think it was a thought in his head that if he was not there, she could rest, because she was up 4 o'clock in the morning to fix him breakfast, to take care of his clothes, to iron them, to do everything. And it just, that's the peace I've made with it. So she had a very tough time, from 2000 to 2009, when everything kind of fell apart, that she lost everything. She lost her kids and her husband, and our family changed very drastically after that and through that. But when she was near death, she went from pure health to, after my papa died, she just declined very, very quickly. I think it
How
was
old was
broken.
she at that
She would
point?
have been 81, 82.
Yeah.
So she was up there. But I think it was a broken heart. I mean, not to make light of it, I really think that her will to live was her children and her husband. And when they were gone, she knew that everybody else was going to be okay. But
Yeah.
that was her rock.
No, I mean, I get that. My wife and I always, it's this weird conversation, and it doesn't last very long, but it's always like, I don't know what I would do if you weren't here. But we
Right.
both know at some point one of us isn't going to be here,
Yeah.
and I
It's,
don't think about it very long, because it would break me.
yeah. Well, I mean, you would probably stop and you would probably be worthless in your day-to-day life, because you would know. I mean, I'm 42, and I think about it. It's like, man, if I'm lucky, by the scale of my dad's side, men don't live past 73. That was where the whole plus one thing for me started. Was I was in such a bad shape on so many fronts that I just needed to make one good decision. And everything that I was looking at was either going to get me closer to who I wanted to be or take me further. So it was plus one or minus one. You never stay the same. There's no zero.
Yeah,
So
I've heard you talk about that. I love
yeah,
that
so
thought process.
I reasoned with myself, man, if 1,000 bad steps put you where you feel like life isn't worth living, reframe that and say, well, life's not worth living this way, and make 1,000 good choices, and you're going to be close to getting out of that hole. So that was where the plus one thing was. It was a meal. It was every person I met. It was every training session. It was every book I read. Do you sit down and just read another, magazine like Sports Illustrated, or do you pick up a book about how to overcome yourself, how to overcome your mind or your thoughts or whatever? And I just started trying to get on a train of plus one, plus one, plus one. But my great grandmother, after I told her about my grandfather's passing, she declined rapidly, went into hospice care, and I saw her and she had taken her necklace off. And I said, Granny, did they take your necklace? And she said, God forsake me. And man, like, I don't want to
She
get
took it
emotional.
off herself
She took it off herself. And that's been one of the hardest things to reconcile in my life,
because of the
because,
pain of losing everybody.
yeah, and that was her first prayer of the day.
Hmm.
And she talked to me about Job a lot. And in those moments, I talked to her about Job. But when she passed very, very rapidly, like I said, they all died within like 8 weeks.
Yeah,
Um, I
yeah.
was looking at myself and I was like, man, what do I glean from all this? Because the only way I can move forward through pain is to make sense of it or try. And it was like, don't spend your life waiting. And that's the only thing that came to my head. God or the devil, one of the two told me life's not worth waiting.
It was
So
God. I'm telling
yeah,
you right now.
yeah. Well,
I mean, the
in full
changes that
circle.
you've made have come from the Lord.
Well, in the full circle, yes. but in the intermediate, I didn't know where it came from because
Right.
I've been through hell at times too,
Yeah.
and I think that's part of it, you know.
I agree with you.
But I got a phone call from Louis at Westside. We'd had some emails and some phone calls prior, but I was already training a little bit and my world's falling apart. And he said, you should come to Westside and train. And I thought that was God's call. Like he was answering a prayer for me.
And for people that don't know the relevance of West Side, just real quick
So
on that.
at the time and probably and forever, Westside Barbell will be one of the meccas of powerlifting. And at this time, 90s, 2000s, late 2000s, it was undeniable that was the best, gym in the world.
And it's not a gym you could just walk into.
No, it's
I mean,
invite
it was
only.
an invite only type of deal.
And it's like working at the oil field. You know,
Right.
it's felons and hard-nosed people and people that your teammates want to kill you, they want to beat you. Everybody's competing for the same thing. And I thought, yeah, this is my opportunity. So leave everything behind. I'm kind of on my own as a adopting that lone wolf mentality. I went up there and kind of made a name for myself and ended up blowing my knees out after a few years. I mean, it was 2013, so I had 4 years at the highest level, 10 years of really high level competition, but 4 years as kind of a competitor that, well, my lowest finish in those 4 years was third place. And if I finished the meet, the lowest place I had was fourth, I think. So won a lot of meets. But then again, I've always kind of walked to the beat of my own drummer. So I was competing and I actually did an 832-pound bench press in equipped powerlifting, which is where you wear like a squat suit or a bench shirt. And originally they started out as safety mechanisms. They were to just keep you a little safer than normal. But like anything, like drag cars, like you figure out a way to get a little more horsepower.
Yeah.
And that's what we figured out with that gear was if you maximize the gear, you could get more and more and more. So I benched 832 at a meet, and I realized at that point in time that this is just really, it was the easiest bench press in my life, to put it that way. It went so fast, I thought the spotters took it. And for me, that was like, this is no longer a strength race. It's
You benched
an arms
832?
832.
I heard you. I've heard you say you benched 6 something, but I didn't know you.
Well,
benched
600
8.
was raw. 600 was raw.
Okay.
And 832 was in the shirt.
Was in the shirt. I got
Yep.
you.
So
that's insane because I benched 405 in college, and that was like a thing to break 400.
Oh yeah.
You know, when you're a college football player, but
yeah,
800 pounds is insane, man.
Yeah, and it's kind of wild what these guys are doing now. I mean, Jimmy Cole benched 1,400. Bill Gillespie got the 1,100. But those again,
crazy.
No disrespect. It's just like watching drag racing, right? You can watch guys that buy a Corvette at the lot and they go to the race and they run it on the track, and you can watch guys that build funny cars or Top Fuels. You know, like there's a lane for everyone. And for me, it was just like, you know what? This is no longer absolute strength. It's having the best gear and strength. So I went raw. I was one of the first guys to ever at the top kind of switch, and I bettered my numbers after Westside. I think I was the first guy to do that, to total more after Westside than before. There might be a couple others that were right around that same time, but I think I was one of the first, if not the first, to total more after leaving Westside. And that gave me a little bit of pride as well as self-respect and respect of the community. And then I went on to total 1,000 kilos raw at Mark Bell's meet in California, which is raw was belt and knee wraps. That was it. And the funny thing about that was Mark Bell made a comment. He was like, we got this hick from Paint Lick coming out to California for last place. And if you looked at the paper, you had Stan Efferding and Dan Green and all these big names from the powerlifting raw side. And I was the lowest number on the totem pole. Like I should not have even, like I wanted to go there to compete with those guys to see where I actually stacked up.
Yeah.
And ended up winning that meet, totaling 1,000 kilos. And one of the coolest things was when I left Westside, or somewhat was asked to leave Westside because I wasn't in a good place. Louis said, you'll never pull 800 pounds if you don't do it with Westside. So get yourself together and get back here. Well, I'm just not the kind of person that takes rejection very well. So every day that I trained, I thought about that. So the only lift that I really cared about for a while was 800-pound deadlift. And the kilo conversions, it's 799.7, 801.3 or whatever, and then 804.7, whatever. And in this meet, I needed 804.7 to hit the 1,000 kilo total. And I was like, man, that 5 pounds, there's a lot of straws that could break this camel's back in between 800 and that. And I knew if I pulled 799.7, Louis would never count that as 800. So,
Isn't it weird though when you're like, I remember trying to break 400, and
oh, yeah,
it's weird how when like you can hit something and there's something 5 or 10 pounds more than that that's almost impossible to hit at a
yep,
certain point. It's
yep,
so strange when you're getting that high numbers that 5 pounds matters, but it does.
it does. But I was juiced up, man, as far as like just on fire that day. Everything felt good. I played my game. I didn't change anything depending on what others were doing. And a couple of those other guys, I think, kind of swung for the fences because of what was happening around them. They were already playing the numbers game, but I was like,
Yeah,
I'm
they were
here.
responding to the situation.
I'm here for last place. So
Yeah.
anything I do is better than last place.
Mm-hmm.
So play your game. And that's exactly what I did. Hit all my lifts. And it's coming down to this one for the win, 4,000 kilos. And then most importantly, to deadlift 800 pounds to prove Louis wrong. Well, the best part about that was Louis, I'd hated Louis after this. Like after I left the gym, in my mind, I built this hatred for him. And I pulled the 804.7. Everything was great. And I wake up to an email from Louis. He said, congratulations. I knew you'd pull 800 because of West Side. And I said, what the fuck are you talking about? Excuse me. I'm sorry. What the hell are you talking about, old man? And he replied back and he said, I bet you thought about how bad you wanted to beat me every day. And I said, I did. And he said, congratulations on your 800 deadlift. So that was kind of the full circle
Yeah.
spectrum. And we actually, I wouldn't say we were as close as we were when I was there, but we made peace. I took some
Mm-hmm.
friends up there and we talked, and that was a chapter that I needed to repair because I was, like I told you before, I was in a terrible place when I was powerlifting. Like I said, on the heels of my world kind of becoming scorched earth, that was the only thing I cared about. I didn't care about Louis. I didn't care about those guys. I just cared about getting better. And that's a good thing, but it's also not good when you don't bite the hand that feeds you, right? So that was what put me on the path to having a really good career in powerlifting. And then I blew my knees out, and both knees, bilateral surgeries. The left leg was like if you tried to twist a chicken leg off, it would just spiral everything, every ligament, tendon, bone. And for 4 years, I went through 17 surgeries, 19 surgeries total, but 17 in 4 years. And I was on my back 74 weeks out of 4 years. A lot of people don't know that. But it really just put me in a place where I didn't know if life was worth living. So after that,
Did they have you on a bunch of pain medication too, or no?
no,
That
no,
wasn't
I
part of
would
it. It was just the
no.
depression of basically not being able to do anything and being,
Well, keep in
immobile.
mind, I was doing seminars, I was coaching, and a lot of that is like flavor of the month stuff. Like if you're on top, people
Yeah.
know who you are and they pay attention.
Yep.
And in this time, I couldn't lift, I couldn't compete. I lost every single sponsorship except Sornex. And Sornex wasn't sponsoring me, but they were having me speak at Summer Strong. They would have me go to events and things like that, and that kept my name out there.
Yeah.
So I went to Bert one day and I said, "Look, man, I can't do this anymore. I can't be based on my performance. I just need a job. I just need stability. I don't care if it's cleaning toilets, what. I just need to start somewhere." And he said, "Okay." He said, "You got a job." And it's 7, 8 years in now since then. Um, and it's just I've never had that solid, like this is exactly what you do because like I told you before we started, everyone at Sornex has so many hats that we're wearing. So kind of delegated to marketing and special projects. And I took that kind of mindset of like a special forces mentality. Like, who do we need to reach? Who do we need to talk to? What companies do we need to align with? So I would set out and just make those dots, make those connections. And that's kind of where I've been till today. It's like on
So
the outdoor side.
how'd you crawl out of that hole emotionally though? Like, I mean, and I'll just say, I'll offer up a little bit of my own. So I had major back problems for about 5 years, three different
Yeah.
back surgeries. At one point, I couldn't walk to the end of my driveway. I had gained about 80 pounds. And I was, my pain medication just continued to escalate. At a
Yeah.
certain point, I was taking over 60 milligrams of oxycodone a day.
Yep.
Completely changed my personality. At a certain point, my wife was like, And she was amazing through the whole thing. But at one point, she just was like, "Look, you're not the same person right now."
Right.
And I recognized that. But there was and I had always said, this kind of harkens back to what you're talking about your great grandfather. I had always had this mentality about people that took their own life. I always said that they were scaredy cats or chickens or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? I was like, how could you do that?
Yeah.
I never considered taking my own life, but I got to a point where I understood it.
Right.
Because my depression was like so bad.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I get how somebody gets to a place where they go, because in my mind, I was sitting there going, at this point, I was like 52, and I'm like, people in my family live into their 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine 30 years of what I was going through.
That's
right?
exactly the same thought I had. It was like, I can't imagine a lifetime more of this, because I wasn't even out of the woods of the surgeries yet. Like my leg was not better. It was safe, but it wasn't. Even now I walk with a limp. My knee doesn't straighten great. I'm due for some kind of reconstruction or something at some point, or replacement. I mean, not reconstruction, but I am due for that. But also, I'm still able to do everything that I used to be able to do, except run a really fast 40 and dunk a basketball. So it's like I don't want to chance another surgery, because a lot of my surgeries were repeat surgeries because of infection. But that was the answer I had too. Was
so how'd you crawl out of it? How'd you get out of it?
April 12th, 2016, I woke up with the intention of not waking up April 13th. And I just sat around and really thought about things, kind of even went through the motions of what might happen. And I had the thought that it's not that I want to die, I just don't want to live like this. And I called my dad, who I would say at this point in time, our relationship was very strained. I was King Kong until I wasn't, and knew everything until I didn't. And, it's kind of that saying, when you're 16, you know everything. Your dad's the dumbest man in the world. When you're 35, he's the smartest man you ever met. And the smartest thing that I ever did was call him. And he just kind of helped me get grounding under my feet of where I was, that I wasn't alone. And to go back to your point, man, if you got one person, you got an army, and versus being alone.
Yeah, there's no question. I think the being alone part, or the feeling alone part, is the part that really puts you in the hole.
Yeah, well, I'd lost everything again. Like I said, I lost all my sponsorships, was losing everything. And the lady I was seeing at the time just kind of saw that I wasn't my best self, and she left and literally took everything in the house except for a backpack and a stack of books and a note that said, "Hey, I hope you get better. I hope you start reading these." And they were all a lot of like personal stories, biographies. A couple of them were told by guys that had been to war and talked about their service and things. And some of them were self-help books. But dude, I'm in a beautiful house on a golf course, and literally the only thing in that house was a pillow, my backpack, some books, and a blanket.
You didn't even have a mattress, huh?
No place to lay down. Well, damn. And to be honest, like
that's rough.
The way it was going, I mean, at this point in time, because I was paying, I took a chunk of money and paid as many bills as I could ahead, because I didn't know when there was going to be more money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, $70 air mattress is like, man, I can't afford that, know? And so I just was kind of in that hole for a little while by myself. And it was just like the day I made that phone call to my dad, I don't know what it was, but when he opened the door, it was like the sunlight came in. I felt the warmth. For April, it was starting to warm up after a long winter. And I think the winter really took a toll on me that year. It was a bad one.
Were you still in Kentucky at that point?
Yeah.
Or where were you?
Yep. Still in Kentucky.
Is it get really cloudy and stuff in the winter up there? Or not?
Oh, it's just miserable gray.
Yeah.
Just miserable gray.
That does not help, man.
No. And, 20, 30 degrees all the way up through March is when we get most of our snow, February, March. So it was just like, and I couldn't get around. And especially when it would snow or ice, I was not chancing even going outside with my knee. So it was just like, man, when that door opened, a real and a literal and figurative door opened. And it got my life turned around. And from there, it was not this linear progression of let's just be awesome. It was like, what do you want to do with this life? What do you hope to achieve in this life? Who do you want to be? Who do you hope your kid remembers you by? Those kind of things started to come in a positive way. So got the job with Sornex, started working there, started training a little differently. Talked to Cam Haynes, actually got me on the kind of exercise train. And really, when I knew that I could turn it around, because I was 350 pounds as a power lifter at my biggest, my best competition days were around 320, 315. But because of the surgeries, I was just gaining mass to move more mass. I was like 345. I had not walked a consecutive mile in probably 5 or 6 years. So I decided one day, you're going to walk a mile. And stupid me parked my truck and I walked a mile. And I was like, well, shit,
You didn't figure out you got to get a mile back.
I got to get a mile back. So I was like, you know what, Brandon? If you can jog 5 steps, that's more than you jogged in forever. So so it was a trot. I mean, it was basically just a little bitty trot, but I did it. So I had 2 miles under my belt. The next day, I was like, you're doing a 5K. So the next day I did a 5K. The next day I was doing a 10K. And that weekend, I thought, do a half marathon, because I'm a psychopath. Like, I literally do not believe I can conceive something that my body can't achieve. Yeah. And especially through powerlifting, like anything that I ever thought I couldn't do, I did. But if I believed I could do it, I would get there. So I started out doing this half marathon super early in the morning. And dude, I hit mile 18 and came unglued. I was like, I'm sorry. I started the half marathon and I was like, in my head, I was like, what kind of pussy starts something with half in the title? You're going to do a marathon. So at mile 18, I was at that breaking point. And I just, for some reason, I called my high school, middle school coach. And there's a history there too, probably an hour-long podcast in itself. But I called him and I said, hey, coach, I'm really struggling. Told him what I was doing. And it was 5 o'clock in the morning in California. It was 8:13 when I made the phone call. 5:13 in California. He said, well, I'm glad you called. I'm about to run. And he put his shoes on. I hear him plop on the floor. He puts them on and he ran with me until I finished the marathon, like on the phone. And dude, when I saw my truck, I just started bawling. And, literally a week or so prior, I'd never even walked a mile. And on that next weekend, I did a marathon. It took me 7 hours or something like that, but it was like, I did it. And from there, I was like, anything is possible. So started losing weight, started training a little bit differently, started getting into the hunting again, started bow hunting, pushing myself there, jiu-jitsu, just all the things that I could construct in a positive light to know that at the end of each day, I got better. Because if I got better in one metric and didn't fall back in any others, I was better. If I got better in, I journaled today, I read a little bit of a book today, I didn't participate in any gossip or any negative talk or anything like that, that's a good thing. So like all of these things started to snowball, and it really just kept going until I kind of found a groove with it. And it was like, I really do think Joe Rogan made an excellent point that life is a lot about momentum. Like once you get positive momentum, that's why winners keep winning. They know how to win. They know how to figure out and stack momentum. But a guy who's got the momentum of negativity, man, he just needs a break. Like he just needs one thing to turn that tide. But so many times it's one good piece of news and 10 more bad pieces. And that's where I was a lot of my days. Like I would have good moments, but the entire day would be like, shit, I got another bill I got to pay, or I got a bill that was missed and it's late now. So it was like going through all that stuff. But once the momentum started forward, it really never has slowed down. And, sitting here talking to you right now, I am so far from perfect, but I am a work in progress that I am proud of. So that's the main thing, is I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of the things I do. I'm not detracting from myself. I'm not detracting from other people. And for me, that's a win.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've noticed in listening to your stuff, to your story, that parallels with mine, and I think even parallels with a lot of people that I've seen that end up in a better place, is the approach towards humility. And And it's interesting because you were in this place at one point in your life. I was in this place, highly competitive environment at one point in my life. And it's very easy when you're in those places. It's all to focus on yourself. Like you are the entire thing, right? It's like, this is what I'm chasing. This is what I'm going after. Everything's about how I get there. There's probably going to be people in my life that I love, but at the end of the day, like this is what I'm doing. And when you become more mature and you start to transition, like at a certain point, I think some people can do that forever. What I found was that I hit a wall where it just kind of felt empty. Even though I was achieving a lot, I didn't feel, there was an emptiness there. And when I started to pursue the fulfillment of other people and trying to serve people as opposed to serving myself, that's something that resonates with me, is because I've heard you talk about humility a lot. And I think that plays a huge role in that transition, in that journey.
Yeah, it does. And the three things, these are the three staples that really kind of catapulted me forward. I had to think of the 5 smallest things that I was thankful for from yesterday. That was the beginning of every journal entry that I put in. And on days that I couldn't really, like, I'm a writer, I'm an English major. I love to
I was an
write.
English major too, man.
There you go.
Isn't that weird?
That's very weird. But I couldn't get the pen to flow without feeling like I was trying to write a story. So my first few journal entries were, I had these 3 points that I would write out, and then I would, or 3 particular things that I focused on, and then I would just go like what time I woke up, what I ate, just getting into the rhythm of learning how to journal. But the 3 things that helped me the most, 5 things at the smallest level that were positive, and you remembered them and wrote them down. So like that could be just the interaction with someone at the post office, or any little thing, holding a door for someone, or someone holding a door for you, or someone buying you a cup of coffee when you're in line, whatever it is. Those little things took precedent, because you win $1,000 somehow. Well, that's obviously a good thing, but like the kind acts, the small acts, the simple things, the minutia is what really is the glue of life, I think. So the 5 smallest things that you're thankful for, number 1. Number 2, completely obligated to help a total stranger in some way. So I'm the guy, I'm not going to give a homeless guy money, but I couldn't tell you the number of guys that I've taken to a place and said, hey man, let me buy you a meal. Let me buy you a cup of coffee. Here, man, I got an extra sweatshirt in the truck. Just take it, whatever. And not for the good of me, like literally to make their day better, and maybe that's kind of like a self tricking thought to think that I'm not doing it for myself, but truly it was from places of, I have it to give, so let me give it.
Yeah, I think you get something back out of it, but ultimately you're doing it because you have a heart for others.
Right. And I wasn't talking, I mean, like I'm talking about it now, but at the time I wasn't like, look at me with this homeless guy that I just fed or whatever. It was like, truly, let me buy you a slice of pizza, let me get you a drink. And hell, this one guy, he was like, man, all I really need is a beer. Well, I bought him a beer. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So, but the last thing was learn something new every single day. And man, you put 365 days together where you reflect on, roughly 1,700 things that were minutia that you're thankful for. You help 365 strangers, hold a door, say hello, put an old lady's cart back. You walk in through the store and you see a shirt that fell off the rack, pick it up and put it back on the rack. Like the dumbest things in the world, but you help 365 strangers. And then you learn 365 new things. That's a pretty good year,
Yeah.
And for me, I started to get into the enjoyment of those things. So learning one thing became, okay, well, I learned the thing, but how can I learn more about it? I'm a deep dive rabbit hole kind of person. So it just opened an entire world that when I was in that space watching 20 hours of Netflix a day or whatever it was during those surgeries, which is just receiving, I was putting in effort to learn or gain something, putting in effort to interact with people in a positive way for no other reason than just to hopefully make their day a little better or a little easier. I'm a heavily tattooed guy. I see an old lady looking strange at me and I'm like, here, man, let me take your card. I hope you have a great day. And they just look at you like, That's the last guy I expected to do that. And that's good.
No, that's right. People have a perception of, if you're a bigger person and then you add the tattoos to it. Like I get that with the big guy thing all the time.
Yeah.
And you're bigger than I am, but people just have a perception of, what they think a person's like.
How did you change that person forever? Like, do they look at the next tattooed guy with fear? Do they look at him as like, well, maybe he's not so bad? And that was what was addictive to me on that front, was like, man, people's perception of me being changed might change their perception of self or of someone else. So yeah, it was just very, very little things. But it was stacking those wins. I wanted to win, if you got a 30-day month, I got to win 16 of those 30. And what I was finding is most months, I was winning 23, 24 or 5 of those days. You win 3 weeks out of 4 weeks in a month, you're doing pretty damn good. And that's what I started banking on, was if I want to have a good year, I got to have a good day. I got to have a good week. I got to have a good month. I'm going to fail. I'm going to have bad days, but I'm never going to have a bad month. And that became the rule.
Yeah. Well, I think I've had you for an hour, and I know that's, I try to keep it there. And it's like, I could sit here and talk to you for 3 easily.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great place to wrap, because that's really good wisdom. And I think, there's a lot of people that listen to these podcasts. It's kind of amazing, when I sit there and look at how many people actually listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's all about hunting, but sometimes it's about, and I think coming out of this, there's a lot that people can take out of this. Have people that, pay attention to the people that love you. Make sure you're a giver more than you're a taker.
Yep.
And honestly, if you're in a hole and you're really struggling, like you said, that one person, there are people out there that love you, and you just have to sometimes take the pride, put it next, take it away, and just reach out to somebody that and they're going to help you, man. 99% of the time they want to help you. You just got to ask.
Well, that's the thing. My dad had no reason to call me that day.
Right.
Like I wasn't going to get a phone call from my dad. And if I was waiting on that phone call, I sure as hell probably wouldn't be here today. But I made the phone call. I made the admission that I needed help. I made the admission that I needed somebody to talk to. I needed somebody to just be there. And he was. And that's the thing, is like, I don't think in my life, very, very rarely have I ever said to someone, man, I really need you to help me right now, that it hasn't been given.
Yeah.
And you can't ask a total stranger that, but like the people in your life, the people that have been there, the people that are rooting for you, and maybe time or distance or whatever has dissipated that relationship, the ones that you can call. And if you're struggling, if you need an ear, man, do it. Because just like with my grandfather, that morning when he left out, I would have told you I was going to see him that night at dinner, and he never came home. My granny, I thought I was going to see her in hospice the next day. She was gone. So, and at some point you're going to be the person that's gone, that's supportive of someone else. Like, life is so miraculous and so short and so small when you really get down to the basis of it. We just need to be better to ourselves so that we can be better to other people first.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate you being here, brother.
Well, appreciate you, man. Thank you very much.
Good stuff. All right. This section of the podcast is brought to you by Osseo Gear. With its one-of-a-kind Raptor camo pattern, Osseo blends seamlessly into the whitetail woods. Osseo's features and technology are designed to fit the unique needs of the bow hunter. With a lifetime warranty, Osseo is designed by bow hunters for bow hunters. Use the code DO NOT GO20 to get 20% off any order from the Osseo Gear website. Visit them at OsseoGear.com. Elevate your game with Osseo. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, we would appreciate it if you would jump on Apple and give me a like on that, on Apple Podcasts, if that's where you're listening. If you're on YouTube, give me a like and subscribe. Follow over on Apple and Spotify. That stuff really helps drive engagement. It really helps more people find the podcast. I hope you liked it. I appreciate you taking your time for being here. Have an amazing day.